We've all been hearing about the microbiome and how important it is for our health. It's kind of funny, right? Only 10 years ago, we believed that killing the bacteria on everything was the way to go. I mean, do you remember those sanitizer sprays everywhere? And now we're gradually learning that, surprise, surprise, not really, we actually need the bacteria around us to thrive and even survive. The thing is that everybody's been focusing almost exclusively on the bacteria in your body that helps you digest food. And that is really important because if you can't digest it, you can't live off of the nutrients, and then you develop all sort of GI problems and you have to... Never mind. But research has been showing us an incredible connection between bacteria in your gut and your mental health. Seriously. For instance, studies have shown that the bacteria in the gut of an animal can change its level of depression. And more research is coming out showing that the same exact thing probably plays a role in anxiety, depression, maybe even autism and ADHD. Isn't that amazing? So I did some research and I decided to add a probiotic mix that helps not only mood, but also the communication between my gut and the brain. It's called Amare, and their wellness kit takes care of everything that I need. The probiotics that have been researched to provide actual tangible help, and the prebiotics and everything that those bacteria need to thrive and do their work. I've been using it myself for 3 months, and I gotta say, it's really helped regulate my mood and keep me even. And it's helping me feel less foggy too, especially in the morning. Look, these guys really did their research, and this stuff is top notch. If you want to get it for yourself, just follow the link in our show notes and you can join the mind biome revolution with me. Welcome to the Ignited Recovery Podcast, a new way forward for anyone looking for answers but feeling left out. If you've been searching for empowerment, triumph, and purpose, you've found them right here. You won't hear the same solutions, and you're not going to have any excuses to fall back on, because Ignited Recovery allows heroes to rise and become their best selves. I'm Dr. Adi Jaffe, and I can't wait to be your guide on this journey. Are you ready to become an Ignited Hero? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Recovery Secrets podcast. The new year's in full swing. We just had an episode on higher power, and so I think that this is going to be a really good follow-up for that, because we're going to talk about some powerlessness today. Hell to the yeah. Powerlessness is one of those words that I had a huge amount of trouble with when I was in my early recovery. First of all, I never really wanted to admit that I was powerless over anything, but also, if I can be honest about it, there were pieces of me that said, I don't think I'm that powerless. It kind of felt like I was giving up responsibility at the same time, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But I know from talking to a lot of people, both back in the days in my recovery, first step, right, powerlessness, that was a huge problem for a lot of people, and they get stuck on that quite a bit, because it's almost like you have to end up thinking of yourself in a way that you've never thought about yourself before. And so it really made me think about what does powerlessness mean? Because, you'll see in a moment, I have some different notions about whether we're powerless or not. And so I looked up the definition, and the definition of powerless is without ability, influence, or power. And then some of the synonyms are impotent, helpless, ineffectual, useless, defenseless, vulnerable. And there's no doubt that they sit in the ballpark of what happens to a lot of people around their addiction. But part of me feels like powerlessness is having zero effect, right? It's having zero impact, being completely helpless, completely ineffective, being defenseless against something. In the context of AA and 12-step programs, that's really used as a way to let somebody else have power back over this struggle, right? Back over this issue that you have with drugs or alcohol or sex or gambling or anxiety or overspending or whatever the thing is that you're struggling with. But here's my thing, and here's what I could never wrap my head around. Isn't the fact that you're taking action proving that you have at least some impact or power over this? I mean, to me, that's kind of what makes it impossible for us to say that you're powerless. How can you be powerless and then make the choice every day? Let's say you're in AA and 12-step to go to a meeting. Are we now deciding that somebody else is controlling your ability to go to a meeting even, let alone like do the work that's involved? And I'm only focusing on 12-step people because trust me, they're not the only ones who think that addicts are powerless over their behavior, but it's, the first step is admitting we're powerless. And so it's such a hard thing for me to understand. It's like, are you then saying that you're giving control over everything else in your life? I don't think that's what they're saying, right? Because even for people who struggle with alcohol, addiction of any sort, there's no doubt that you have power over other things. You have again, I've written about this and maybe I'll put the link to some of these articles in the past, but like right now you guys can't see this, but I'm picking up a glass of water. I think we're pretty clear that I have power over that, right? I'm not helpless. I have a choice in that. And yet somehow we've moved it over to the notion that I'm powerless. I have no control over my choice to pick up a glass of wine or a meth pipe or a syringe, right? Or to go gamble. That's the idea, right? I have power over some things, but not over other things. And we've talked about this and the illusion of overall control. And I think that's an important thing for everybody to understand. Look, you're not in full control of your life. There are other people playing a role. There's chance. There's a lot of other stuff that's playing a role in it. But powerlessness means you have no power. It's not being less powerful. It's having no power. And to me, a big piece of this, the reason why, but people in traditional kind of approaches jump to powerlessness right away is because I think it has something to do with not paying attention to the underlying issues. Because if you really think about it, at least from my experience and the experience of a lot of like dozens and hundreds of people that I've worked with by now, in traditional, especially kind of 12-step approaches, underlying issues are almost considered superfluous. They're almost considered like, that's the whiny sort of excuse, denial kind of conversations, right? Well, I was abused when I was a child, or I went through a really tough high school experience, or I have social anxiety. All those things are considered superfluous because what you actually have is this condition, this addiction disease, and that condition makes it so that you are unable to function. And I've written articles, again, I'll definitely have a link to this one, about the fact that, yeah, for some people, addiction does look like a disease. I would argue we haven't identified a complete biological stream that leads inevitably into this, right? Like if you have the flu virus, you will have a response to it. And if your response in your body is not strong enough to contain the flu virus, you will get the flu. There's a biological, what we call vector, that leads you to the disease. Not as clear cut with addiction, which is why I call it a disorder or a syndrome instead of a disease. And sure, I understand why people want to ignore the underlying issues. Look, the way that your biology interacts with your environment throughout time, throughout your life, since the moment you were born all the way to now, it can sometimes feel too big to handle. I mean, how do you deal with everything that's happened in your past? We know that some of the biological determinants that are related to addiction and mental health development problems have to do with like hypoxia at birth. That literally means if you didn't get enough oxygen at your birth, there's the potential for long-term damage decades down the line. How do you deal with that? Well, that's a big question, and it's a lot of what we do here in the podcast and the articles I write for Psychology Today and all these other things. But I don't think you ignore it. I don't think that's the right answer. Because the way I see it is, it's not only about looking at the past. It's about learning about the impact of the past, the way it has on us, right? So on our biology, on our beliefs, psychology, on the changes in our environment, all those sorts of things. And then planning how to move forward in a way that makes sense given where you want to end up. So it's not just about looking at the past, right? It's not about getting stuck there, but it's also definitely not ignoring it, because if you ignore the influence that's had, you're writing off your entire experience and trying to summarize, and if you haven't seen my TEDx talk, trying to summarize it into a label. I'm an addict. Well, I'm not an addict. I'm definitely, especially not only an addict, right? There's so many other pieces to the puzzle, and if I ignore all the other pieces, then I think I'm doing myself a huge disservice. And so to get back to powerlessness, I already said it, like, just the fact that you're taking action, in my opinion, means that you have some impact or power over what's going on. I mean, even the planning, right? Being able to go through, let's say you're in traditional treatment, over the steps, doesn't that prove you have some power? I'm going to plan to do step number 3, and now I'm going to go do step number 3. That planning, including the looking back at what happened in the past and taking action right now and into the future, that is power. To me, that is the definition of power. And that's why I don't believe in powerlessness in addiction. I'm not saying I believe in full control. That would be ridiculous, right? We're not gods. There are other forces in play in the world, but we're not powerless. We're not. It's just not true. Now, part of the reason I think that I don't know if I want to kind of couch this or have a caveat for this, is I do think it's important to not try to do this alone, because we're not all powerful. I think we need support in this. But I think part of the support we need is from other people who recognize the amount of influence we can have over it. Because look, I think to myself this all the time. I say, look, I can't do anything about what happened to me to date. I can't change it. And I'm definitely not responsible for every single thing that happened in my past. But I definitely have power over where to go from here, right? Like, I can pause, and this is a lot of what we do in the Ignited Hero program. I can pause and I can analyze it, and then I can make decisions moving forward that take the past into account, but change the trajectory of my life. To me, that is ultimate power. And that's why I named my program the Ignited Hero program. Almost everybody who comes into the Ignited Hero program comes in feeling like an unmotivated loser who's no good, dumb, incapable, unlikable. And I'm not putting these words in other people's mouths. These are the words people use to describe themselves. I don't know if this relates to you, if you're struggling with anything like this, or anybody who's struggled with anything like this, but these are literally direct words that people have used. And I called it the Ignited Hero program because the whole point is to turn people from people who see themselves as losers, by the way, the same way I saw myself 15, 18 years ago, into people who are proud of themselves. I'm actually super excited because as this 2019 started, we're laying out a whole plan, like a step-by-step level system, almost like a game of life that all of our participants are going to walk up to show them how advanced they become, to make sure that they and the people around them can pay attention to the heroes that they've become. I can tell you from my own experience in life that powerless is the one thing for sure I wasn't in this equation. Did I used to make a lot of excuses for shit? Absolutely. Were there things that happened to me in life before I got help, during the time that I got help, and after that I could have changed and didn't have the foresight to, or didn't have the right tools to take action on? 100%. Absolutely. There's no way to avoid the fact that I've done dumb shit even when I knew it was dumb and I didn't want to do it. I don't think that's the same thing as powerlessness. That's like saying I was powerless over math before I learned algebra. It's not true that that was the case. I just had to learn the right tools to put them into action. I just had to learn how to exert my power. I had to learn what I needed, and then I had to learn the right ways to get past those struggles in my own history. So, powerlessness, as in zero power, as in helplessness, as in being defenseless, to me is a far, far too big a word to use in the context of addiction. And I know I'm going to get haters on this, and I know I'm going to get people that tell me you don't understand real addiction, and you're putting people at risk by telling them that they have power, but fuck you. That's ridiculous. A, I've been there myself. B, I've now known dozens and hundreds of other people who've gone through this. So telling me that I don't know the equation is just absurd. Much easier to fall back on the notion that I'm powerless and I need to hand this off to somebody else, if you can buy into that, than to take some of the responsibility that we need to take. And look, for those of you for whom this clicked, you know who I'm talking to. You knew this was a little wrong. You knew it was off. You knew powerlessness was too big of a word. Yeah, I don't have full power over it, but I'm not powerless. And so my challenge to you, this is 2019, do something about it. Start exerting your own power in whatever small way you have to do right now. Go to other meetings, go to AA meetings, read my Abstinence Smith book, go join our IGNTD Hero program, take Sophie's relationship workshop with me online. Do whatever it is. Listen to all of our other episodes on the podcast. Start exerting your power right now. Because here's my promise to you. If you start putting that into play this year, if you start acknowledging and taking action on the things that you do have power over, 2019 is going to be an incredible year for you. Thank you so much for paying attention. Thank you for listening. Love you all, and I will see you next week. Thank you for tuning in to the IGNTD Heroes Recovery Podcast. I really hope you found the information here useful and that we'll see you back here next week. And look, I want to make sure that this podcast is the most useful it can be for you, so please let me know by emailing info@ignited.com if there are any specific topics or questions you'd like to have addressed. As usual, if you like this episode, I would love for you to leave us a 5-star review and rating. Thanks, and see you next week.